Welcome to Glacier National Park. We are about to take a drive over the Continental Divide on the Going to the Sun Road. Our tour begins on the shores of Lake McDonald, located on the west side of the divide. We are traveling toward the east overlooking Lake McDonald, the largest lake in Glacier National Park. The lake is 10 miles long, 1 to 1.5 miles wide, and 472 feet deep. McDonald Valley was carved by glacial activity, which created a trough of typical U-shaped lakes with smooth contours on the sides. This glacial lake, along with other lakes located in the park, has an abundant supply of West Slope cutthroat trout and the Dolly Varden, also known as the bull trout, which is an endangered species. The paved Going to the Sun Road extends 52 miles and spans the width of Glacier Park, crossing the Continental Divide at Logan Pass. It passes through almost every type of terrain in the park, from large glacial lakes in cedar forest in the lower valleys to wind-swept alpine tundra on top the pass. There are many areas to pull over and stop for a look at the scenery, such as this. The crystal blue waters of the lakes is always an invitation for the angler. However, remember that all bull trout must be released immediately to protect the species from extinction. There is still great fishing for trout, whitefish, kokanee salmon, and even Arctic grayling. Over 1,000 waterfalls flow into the 200 lakes of Glacier National Park. The first recorded visit to Lake McDonald occurred in 1873 or 1874. Two Army officers, Charles Woodruff and John Van Arsdale, reached the lake and named it Terry's Lake after their general, Alfred Terry. McDonald has also been called Glacier Lake. Glacier National Park Service maintains the historic Lake McDonald Lodge along with other hotels and motor inns within the park boundaries. In the late 1800s, George Bird Grinnell was introduced to the area and declared it the crown of the continent. The fact that Grinnell was the influential editor of Forest and Stream magazine enabled him to initiate the movement to declare the area a national park. George Bird Grinnell is celebrated today as the father of Glacier National Park. It took 10 years of active lobbying before President Taft signed the bill creating Glacier National Park on May the 11th, 1910. 1,600 square miles of spectacular scenery and primitive wilderness, but no road through it until 1933. First called the Trans Mountain Road, then Highway to the Sky, work began on the road in 1921. Early tourists in Glacier saw the park on horseback due to the lack of the roads in the interior. For a long time, Glacier was best known as a saddle horse park with over 700 miles of trail. The Park Saddle Horse Company had 1,000 horses that carried visitors along the mountain trails. In 1921, 20,000 people visited the area, mostly on horseback. By the mid-1930s, nearly 200,000 awe-inspired visitors were making their way to the park by automobile. There are several theories about the name McDonald, but the most probable and accepted derives the name from Duncan MacDonald. Duncan was the son of the well-known Angus MacDonald of the Hudson Bays Company and Catherine Baptiste, a lady of Nez Perce, Mohawk, and French ancestry. She had the remarkable experience of traveling with a motley crew to California and Arizona about 1841. Duncan MacDonald's Indian name was Crooked Heels. He accompanied a number of parties across the mountains into the plains and was sent by the Deer Lodge newspaper to consult with the Nez Perces, who had escaped into Canada at the time of Chief Joseph's surrender. Shortly after that, in November of 1878, he made another trip to Canada, camping at the foot of the lake at the traditional Indian campground with his 2 packers and guided by Chief Anise. By his own account, he carved his name and date on a nearby tree. In time, people who saw this tree gradually applied the name MacDonald to the lake. From this lake, Duncan MacDonald and his packers proceeded up the North Fork to Canada. On their way, they ran into a party of Nez Perce returning to the United States. This could have been very dangerous, but since Duncan was related to them, he urged them not to continue into the States where they would be arrested or killed. They returned to Canada, helping Duncan through the deep snows. This is McDonald Creek. It flows like a raging river during the spring runoff. A portion of McDonald Creek is labeled Riviere dei Rivali, after the medical missionary Antonio Rivali, who brought smallpox vaccine from Italy in 1845 to save many Indian lives. He spent most of his life among the Indians of Montana. Above McDonald Valley, Douglas firs, lodgepole pines, and western larch trees march up the slopes of the mountains. Trees cover 2/3 of Glacier National Park. closely, and you'll see where we will be driving in a few minutes. Along the cliffs of the garden wall, cutting across the face of this mountain, is Going to the Sun Road. McDonald Creek makes a right-hand bend into the valley and through a series of cascades flows to Lake McDonald. We have started our first switchback and heading for the loop, which is a hairpin turn onto the next switchback that will carry us across the garden wall. On our way to the loop, we'll go through the West Side Tunnel. Evans Peak stands majestically in the distance. Here is the loop. And now we are heading toward Logan Pass. Named after a Texan, William Logan, who wouldn't take no for an answer. I'll tell you more about William Logan in a few minutes. In the meantime, let's just sit back and enjoy the spectacular scenery during this part of our journey. And I'll meet you up at the Continental Divide in Logan's Pass. Oh, be sure to look for the Weeping Wall on your left as we travel across the Garden Wall. Pass in the distance. In 1910, William Logan was named to head up road and trail construction in the newly created Glacier Park. Logan was born at Fort Belknap, Texas in 1856. His father was an Army captain who made a career of fighting Indians, and William became a scout for the Army against the Sioux and Nez Perce tribes. In 1911, William Logan was appointed the first superintendent of the park. His mission? To make Glacier Park more accessible. He even secured $69,200 for park management. His first priority was unmistakable. But his first duties upon arrival at Glacier involved firefighting. All of Logan's attention in those first few months had to be focused on putting out forest fires and protecting property. Once the fires were extinguished, his goal was to bring a road from the east to the west side of the Continental Divide through Glacier Park. Logan had to secure right-of-ways from many private landowners for the new road from Belton, which is now West Glacier, to Lake McDonald. Many trees and stumps stood in his way. The trees, many of them large hemlocks and red cedars, were cut. The stumps, dynamited, and the roadbed graded. Logan reported spending at least $1,000 on dynamite and said that blowing out the stumps is the hardest part of the work. What had been termed the worst 3 miles in Montana was glowingly praised by the Daily Interlake newspaper. Logan's hard-won 2.5 miles would become the western end of the Trans-Mountain Highway that he had promised would be built. It remained, however, for his successors to settle on a route and see the road through to completion. Even though Logan died in 1912, the seeds had already been planted for full-scale exploration of possible road routes through the park. For years and years, government crews combed Glacier's ragged peaks and icy passes to find the most likely route for the road. The part we just came across, the Garden Wall, was chosen because it could be laid out mostly in the sun, so a lot of the snow could melt off on its own each spring. Logan Pass, with an elevation over 6,600 feet, is located on the Continental Divide, separating major drainages of North America. At this point, water flows west to the Pacific Ocean and east to the Hudson Bay. Here, the winter snowfall averages 10 feet on the level, with drifts of over 80 feet. Glacier National Park is a landscape that owes its allegiance to ice. Starting down the east side of the Continental Divide and headed for St. Mary Lake. Going to the Sun Road was only a dotted line on a map in the 1920s, and America's infatuation with the automobile was in the heat of its youth. The marriage of cars and roads did not bypass this most remote region. Despite the effects of the Great Depression, this road revealed a portion of the most romantic western landscape the nation had to offer. Not only the wealthy leisure class, but the burgeoning middle class as well could follow this road through stately expanses of virgin forest, past deep, clear glacier-carved lakes, alongside vertigo-inspiring cliffs, and through meadows of delicate alpine flowers. The crown of the continent was most certainly a trip to write home about. This is the eastern tunnel that cuts through Piegan Mountain, named for the Piegan subtribe of the Blackfeet Indians. The weather is turbulent on the eastern side of the Continental Divide. The eastern winds howl frequently. The eastern winds have blown snowdrifts clear to the roof of the Mini Glacier Hotel. The east may be windy, but it is also sunny, unlike the western side, which gets a lot of snow and overcast skies. In 1972, an Alaskan Klondike Chinook hit a freight train on the eastern side of the park, and the winds knocked 7 rail cars off the track. Early travelers to Glacier National Park were advised of rules they should observe while on the park roads. Automobiles in motion must not be less than 50 yards apart, except when passing. Gears must be kept enmeshed, except when changing. Speed is 12 miles per hour on grades, 20 miles per hour on open stretches. Horns must be sounded on curves. Muffler cutouts must be closed when passing horses, hotels, camps, or a checking station. As they kept a close eye on the gears and engine temperature, the early tourists, along with us today, are impressed with the engineering feat that going to the Sun Road represents. Applying their brakes and imagination, visitors began to appreciate the hazards involved in construction. Blasting rock out of sheer cliffs, bridging rushing streams, and working in severe, brutal weather. It is truly an engineering marvel. Planning and building this 52 miles of road took nearly 20 years and $3 million. Men with boxes of dynamite carried on their shoulders descended vertical ladders 75 to 100 feet and perching precariously on narrow ledges set the initial charges of dynamite to clear the way for other workers. Uh-oh. Looks like the forest rangers are after us. In just a few seconds, we will be coming up on what was once one of the largest glaciers in the Rocky Mountains, Jackson Glacier. It has melted so rapidly in recent years that it is now divided into several smaller ice bodies. It lies between Mount Jackson and Blackfoot Mountain and was named for William Jackson, a scout for General Custer on the Little Bighorn, who later guided early visitors in the Glacier Park area. There's Jackson Glacier, nestled out through the trees. Did you know that glacier ice looks white when it is covered with snow, or when you see it from a distance? But up close, the ice of a glacier is really blue. At the peak of construction on Going to the Sun Road, a string of 60 pack horses hauled in pipe, rails, fuel, food, and other necessities. Horses could be hired for 70 cents a head, with feed furnished. A horse could carry about 150 pounds, so 3 50-pound boxes of dynamite made a well-balanced load. Pay was good for the times. A man could average $1.15 an hour for excavation work, though less skilled workers received as little as 50 cents an hour. On the west side, to build a bench on the cliffs for the road to follow, blasting was required. Dangers associated with blasting, especially when black powder was used, included hanging off the cliffs on manila rope. The men would drill holes into which the powder would be loaded, and the highly explosive black powder could be set off in a heartbeat by a stray spark. The blasters often worked in stocking feet because of the fear that sparks from the hobnails of their shoes would ignite the black powder. Falling rock was a constant hazard, and it was pre-hard hat era. Though some of the men used war surplus helmets, most simply did not bother. To get a steam shovel to the site of the East Side Road construction, workers loaded it onto a pontoon barge and floated it to the head of St. Mary Lake. For more information regarding the building of the road in the park, 2 books are recommended: Glacier National Park and Waterton Lakes National Park by Robert Sharp, and Going to the Sun by Pat O'Hara and Danny On. Glacier National Park in the United States and Waterton Lakes National Park in Canada are formally known as the International Peace Park. The idea to link the 2 parks originated at the first Goodwill meeting of the Rotary Clubs of Alberta and Montana in 1931. By their efforts, laws were passed the following year by Canada and the United States to link the 2 parks into the first International Peace Park in the world. This is St. Mary's Lake. At the Sun Point picnic area, we will have a better view of the lake. What a place to sunbathe. St. Mary Lake, often called the Upper Lake, is 10 miles long and from 1/4 mile to a mile wide. In some places, this bow-shaped lake is over 300 feet deep. St. Mary Valley is one of the largest valleys of the park. Its steep sides and curved floor speak of glacial activity. This is Going to the Sun Mountain. The legend says, an old man came to save the Indians in time of trouble and went back to the sun, leaving his face on the peak. The Rocky Mountain goats probably have the best view in the park. This nimble mountain goat is not fazed by heights. Truly, a sure-footed mountaineer out looking for plants to nibble on. The Great Northern Railroad adopted the Rocky Mountain goat for its trademark. The railroad no longer exists, but some railroad cars still have a picture of the Rocky Mountain goat on them. Over 60 mammals, 200 birds, and 1,200 different plants are found in the park. This is a jammer bus. These motor coaches were built in 1936 for travel over Going to the Sun Road. The red 15-passenger coaches have roll-back canvas tops for a better view. The term jammer was given to the drivers because they tended to grind and jam the gears as they traveled up and down the mountains. From Logan Pass, as we return heading west, the Garden Wall looms before us. The Highline Trail begins at Logan Pass and will take you to the Granite Park Chalet and on to the Loop if you're up for a 7-mile hike. The Going to the Sun Road was officially opened at noon on July the 15th, 1933. 4,000 to 5,000 people watched as the Blackfeet, Kootenai, and Flathead Indians knelt, faced one another, and passed the pipe of peace from right to left, marking an end to years of hostility between them. The Loop will take us back to the McDonald Valley and Lake McDonald, where we started our tour of Going to the Sun.